So I want to transition into the other thing that I was very excited to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And here's the part where I get to go out and try to say this word that we both know I can't pronounce because you heard me try to pronounce it before we started recording. But so you have prosopagnosia. How do you actually say it? Can you say it for me, please?
Prosopagnosia.
I was much
And I don't
closer this
even know if
time.
I'm saying it right. That's what I've heard. Prosopagnosia.
Well, you actually have it, so you're allowed to say how it's pronounced. You get to define that for yourself. I feel like, but
All
please,
right.
please tell everybody what that is and some of your experiences living with it.
Yeah, so the common term for that is face blindness. And I don't know how long I've had this, but I'm pretty sure that it was one of the things that I was born with. You can either be born with it or you can get a brain injury and
Mhm.
develop it at some point. So there's two types. And I'm pretty sure that I was born with it because I can look back and see how it was affecting my life, even though I had no name for it and I didn't even know why it was affecting my life. But I don't recognize faces. So when they test you, they kind of cover the hair and everything, and they
Mhm.
just give you this part of your face.
Mhm.
I cannot recognize faces. You can put two faces next to each other and then show it to me later. I don't know it. I have driven right past my own children in the car line when they were in elementary school because they weren't in the spot that they were usually in, and
Mhm.
they had to come running after my car. It was heartbreaking, and I hid it for so long, and it was one of those things, as I was talking about me trying to find myself. I went through many, many years of depression during that time when I didn't want anything to do with any spirituality or anything, and I had been told for so long that I was demon possessed because of my just gifts that I had. Like I was in this deep, dark pit, and one of those things that I now consider a gift, I've learned how to work with it, was this prosopagnosia of not being able to recognize people. And so I didn't go out a lot. I stayed in my room. I didn't want to go out to concerts. I didn't want to go out to the local grocery store because if I were to run into somebody, and I knew a lot of people because I taught all over South Carolina in my late teens and early 20s. And so I would stay away from that because I knew I'd never recognize anyone. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I didn't know why. I thought I just was careless and had a terrible memory. And it wasn't until I found out that there was a thing such as face blindness, and I started researching it, and I found that there were um, Yale and different universities, and there's one in UK that you I was part of their research study, and I found out that I have it really, really bad. The below average is 57 out of 100, I think, and
Mhm.
I scored a 29.
Oh
I have
wow.
it bad. So I think it's out of 72. So a 29 out of 72. And if you are below average, it's 57. So I have it pretty bad, but I had no clue why. I just knew that I was terrible with faces and terrible with names. And my husband would come up beside me sometimes when he was around, and he would he would kind of secretly give me clues. He would say, "Oh, hi, so and so. How's it been going at the church? Or how's your child, so and so?" He would give me clues in the talk, and so I would know who they were because I would absolutely have no idea. And I've even not even recognized family, people that I've seen my whole life, my own children. And goodness gracious, if it's not even somebody that I see a lot, I will never recognize them.
That's first of all, again, thank you for sharing that. That is one of those things that until I met somebody who had it, I thought it was a made up, Grey's Anatomy type condition or something like that. I
Yeah.
didn't think that it was something that actually existed. Um, so can you tell me what again? And I apologize to keep doing this, but you just have so many fascinating topics to talk about. But what are some of the misconceptions you see about that diagnosis? What do people get wrong about it? Do they think that it's more severe than it actually is, or do they think it's not as severe as it is?
I think number one, people've never heard of it.
Hmm.
And so just like you, the misconception is that it is completely fake. You just can't remember things, or you just don't care to put the work in into
Mhm.
remembering my name. So for me, names have a lot to do with it because if I can't recognize your face, how in the hell am I going to know your name?
Mhm.
So names are very much a part of it for me. And people just think that you're too stuck up or you're better than them. I ran into that a lot, and I feel like I'm not stuck up at all. But I'm very quiet. I used to be way more quiet when I was kind of in my little shell.
Mhm.
But people just thought that I was stuck up, and I just did not put the time into it. So that's a misconception right there. Is that if you just tried harder, but it is an actual thing wrong with my brain. It cannot process people's faces. And so that in itself is really difficult. It's like any kind of disability that you talk about.
Mhm.
People have to make concessions in a sense. People have to figure out how to work around it. So for me, I will recognize if someone has like a crazy hairstyle. If
Mhm.
someone always has blue hair or always has, an updo, I'll recognize that. I will recognize people's voices. I'll recognize if they have a limp or things like that. I also recognize if they're in the same spot every time. So
Mhm.
at one point before COVID, I worked at a local museum, and there were people who would sit at the front desk every time. I could tell you their name because they were always in the same seat every day, sitting at the same desk.
Mhm.
But if that person said, "Hey, Pam," or how you doing, and they ran up to me at the local Food Lion, I wouldn't have a clue because they're not in the spot where I know them, and that's the reason that I didn't recognize my children either. Is usually I picked them up at one certain post and they weren't there. So, as far as other misconceptions, I mean, I think the main one is people just have never heard of this, or if they have, it's been on some TV show where it's been made into something,
Mhm.
really strange. Um, but I think that another kind of misconception about it is that it's being broken. That if someone does recognize it, well then fix it. You've
Mhm.
got this thing wrong. What can they give you? What pill can they give you? What therapy can they give you to fix it?
Mhm.
There must be something you can do to make it better. This is one of those things. That's why they have so many research studies. There is nothing that they can do at this time to fix it. And it is a spectrum. So you have some people like me who are, 29 out of 72,
Mhm.
much lower, but you could have someone who is higher up on that scale that if they see people often, they may be able to recognize that. There are some people that are even kind of lower on the scale than me that can't recognize cars. I kind of have trouble with that. I can never remember colors of cars and things like that. But they can't recognize their pets. They can't recognize one animal from the other. So there's a huge spectrum about it. It's not just, okay, you don't recognize faces or you do recognize faces. There's a huge spectrum going on there.
So what does that feel like to you when you see someone's and you don't recognize them? Is it like meeting a stranger every time, or do you get any kind of um, I don't want to say rush of adrenaline or fear or whatever it is, but just what is that like for you when you do see somebody?
So there's two answers to that because I'm
Mhm.
different now. And I've
Mhm.
completely come to accept what that is. I tell people, I'd never told people before, I tell people I have it,
Mhm.
and I don't feel the same about it anymore. It's just a part of me. But before I came to terms with that, I had guilt and I felt
Mhm.
deep shame because I thought that I was not doing something to fix it. I thought that I was just a broken individual and I'm not able to do, can't I do something? Can't, I would keep lists of names. I would take photos, constantly take photos of people. And so shame was the biggest just emotion and fear. And fear is what kept me in my house all the time. Fear is what kept me from not wanting to be around people,
Mhm.
not wanting to even go into the local store because you're familiar somewhat with Columbia. It's not the biggest area,
No,
even though
and
it's a
especially
capital.
in big areas like that, excuse me, small areas like that, it they you're supposed to know everybody.
Exactly. Exactly. To me, it seems like a superpower to be able to recognize people. So I taught children when I was a teenager into even getting married in my mid 20s. And so my husband knows a lot of the children that I taught. I in fact, was a children's minister at a local church in my 20s. And we will see these children who now 20 some years later, they are, 20, late 20s, 30s. If I can't even recognize you on, day to day,
Yeah.
you think I'm going to recognize you 20 years later, 10 years later? My husband knows everyone. He knows them all. And he will say, "Oh, that is so and so who was in your kids' class at the Presbyterian church." And that to me is a superpower. I
Mm.
cannot comprehend because I think I have never had that ability. I cannot comprehend the ability to recognize someone when time has passed like that.
Mm. Wow. Again, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm just sitting here and thinking because I'm a bad person. I'm just thinking about how I can start telling people I have it now because I don't want to remember their faces because most people's faces aren't worth remembering, in my opinion, anyways. But what's and again, all jokes aside for a second. Well, not all jokes, some jokes aside. um, I am really, really, really bad with names, and I
Mm,
used to be a children's coach for martial arts, and I see these kids probably anywhere between 2 to 4 times a week, and I would not remember some of their names. And so what I would do is I would cheat. If I was getting ready to pair them up to do something or whatever, I would start like 3 kids before the kid's name I didn't know, and I just start tapping them on the shoulder instead of saying names. So I'd make sure that they knew I knew this kid's name, but I'd start tapping, tapping. So that way the kid whose name I didn't know that it was him was the reason that I started
right.
tapping shoulders and stuff like that. But there's a song by this comedy group called Garfunkel and Oates, I think it is. That and it basically the gist of the song is, "Am I a jerk for not knowing your name, or are you just bleh?" And that's what I often think about. It's like, is it the fact that I'm a jerk because I don't know people's names, or are you just not interesting? Or you know what I mean? They're like, they even say in the song, like, get a haircut, get a crazy haircut, get a hat or something like that. Be rememberable in some form or fashion or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe you can do that in the once you hit about 55. I think 55 is the age where you could really start just letting go and not caring about stuff. Then you can start being more aggressive about it. You're like, look, dude,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember your face because you're not interesting. You're like, you need to be more interesting next time, and maybe I'll remember you.
And so I challenge you to be your authentic self and to say, I will never remember you because you're not interesting.
Oh, I don't go quite that far because I think I do admit now, generally speaking, I've gotten a lot better at it, accepting myself, as you say, and just admitting, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Can you remind me your name, please? I
Yeah.
try to do that more often now. Try to be fair to the person and tell them that I don't remember their name. But yeah, it's pretty bad, and it's my boss, my former boss. She knew I was really bad with names, and so if somebody came in to talk to her while I was in her office or something like that, as soon as they left, she'd be like, "Who was that?" And I'd be like, Jeff? She's like, she's like, no. And she would just start cracking up about how I never remembered anybody that we talked to. And I told her the same thing. It's like, I just don't find some people interesting. If you're not interesting, your name doesn't get locked in, but I mean, again, that's a rude way
Yeah.
to say it just because it's funny to me, but no, I think we all have different challenges for those type of things. Like you said, it's one important to be honest with yourself that you have that challenge. And then also, as you said, you've come to
Yeah.
now, being able to admit that to other people because it can be hurtful to other
Yeah.
people that you don't remember them. But again, if you have challenges with names, you have challenges with faces or whatever. And again, yours is much more of a serious condition than mine is. Mine is probably just that I am lazy and I'm kind of a jerk, a jerk to people. But I think it's important to be able to be honest about that with yourself and other people because again, that just makes the world a better place to me. But also, it can help not hurt people's feelings if you're honest about it and you tell them because if not
Yeah.
I end up doing a lot of hey chief buddy guy friend like all those little nicknames that aren't people's names because I don't have it.
Yes.
And I remember there's a time my girlfriend was with me and she got mad at me because I didn't introduce her to somebody, and then after that person left, I was like, I wasn't confident about what their name was, so I couldn't go, hey X, this is my girlfriend, because I didn't know their name. It's like, so I couldn't introduce you to them.
Yeah. Yeah, so you feel my struggle more than some people do because you have had to develop ways to deal with not learning
Mm,
names just like I have had to develop means to do that too, and some of the same things. So here in the South is completely plausible to say, hey darling, hey honey,
Hmm.
how you doing. I got real good at that, because then you don't have to know their names, and then they start asking you certain stuff. And I wouldn't ever introduce anybody to anybody, because even if I thought I knew who it was, I still was not sure. And so I didn't do that either. And yeah, I just found different ways when I would teach classes, even if it was the same people 5 weeks in a row, every time they had name tags. Or I
Hmm.
have little cards at the museum, and they would put them on the front of their little desk with their names on it. Like, I found all these ways to work around it. And you're tapping them on their shoulder, doing
Hmm.
it where they come at that point. That is a way to work around something that you don't feel comfortable about. And that's what people with prosopagnosia have to do as well. They find ways to work around it, so that they don't, if they're not confident in saying, hey, I've got this problem, I have face blindness. Because even if you're not truly confident and you tell someone that, more than likely they're going to say, is that even a real thing? Are you sure that's a real thing?
Hmm.
Which just downplays and puts you in this little tiny space of, yeah, they don't even believe that I have this. So it's scary to say something like that.
And just going back to, this is where my jerk nature I think would help me out, because if you don't believe that I have the challenge I have, then I don't feel bad about not remembering your face anymore. That you just took all my
Exactly.
guilt away. I no longer feel guilty. I feel vindicated in not remembering you, because I don't want to remember you. You're not a good person. Thanks for checking out Starting Nowhere. Come find us on Facebook so you can comment on this and other clips and episodes of Starting Nowhere.